support this shambles of a bill.
I call Gareth Hughes.
Kia ora, Mr Speaker. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou kia ora. I rise to take a call on the third and final reading of the Exclusive Economic Zone and Continental Shelf Economic Effects Bill. Mr Speaker, the Green Party for long period, in fact the entire time of our history in Parliament, we've called for overarching oceans legislation to deal with the issues this House is dealing with now, but also an overarching legislation that looks at spatial planning, that looks at marine protection. We believe what we need is a holistic package to how we relate with our oceans. We agree with the member Dr Nick Smith that Labor in their 9 years should have acted. They had the opportunity but didn't. But we disagree with his misrepresentation that the Greens were silent over that period. In fact, the entire time we've been in Parliament, we've been calling for this. Mr Speaker, our oceans face a number of challenges, from the recent news of the Arctic melting at a record level this summer through to acidification, overfishing, pollution. It's important that we get this right. This is a historic opportunity for our Parliament to make sure we do pass enduring, robust legislation to provide iwi, community, recreational users, everyone who has an interest in our oceans, which is all New Zealanders, because we intrinsically are connected to our oceans. We love our oceans. We want to do it right. And unfortunately, this Parliament is missing an opportunity to pass an enduring, robust legislation. Instead, what we're doing is a permissive, weak bill, which quite simply isn't going to be protecting and preserving our EEZ. It's simply going to facilitate risky extractive activities. It's going to make deep-sea drilling easy. Mr Speaker, we've got the fifth largest EEZ in the world. It's internationally significant. It contains some amazing ecosystems, but it's also something we know very little about. NIWA has only scratched the surface, if you will, of what's in our oceans, what is down in the benthic environment, and we really do risk trashing not only that valuable clean green brand, but some special, unique ecosystems in this rush for minerals and extractions. What we're going to see as an outcome from this bill is quite simply a feeding frenzy of lawyers as they try and interpret what favour cautions mean when we've had the opportunity of using the internationally and nationally recognised precautionary principle instead. We're going to see the lawyers in their feeding frenzy try and debate the adaptive management provisions. We don't think the bill has been drafted to an adequate standard, and it's simply going to be benefiting the lawyers. We saw a raft of amendments not in the spirit of working with the opposition parties in a manner that was going to see opposition support and a realistic and honest conversation with the opposition. We saw the amendments tabled at the EDS conference, which is a shame because all the opposition parties went to the Minister quite constructively, trying to improve the bill, and sadly we saw these amendments slammed down on the table, if you will. We would have preferred it to go back to the Select Committee, because what we saw was just spin, quite simply spin, coming from the Minister who's talking about rubbish over there in the corner. We saw spin. There were a few improvements, but there was the other measures which didn't make it because of the Olympics being on. Things like the Anadarko clause, the transitional provisions, which are SOPs to the oil industry. Mr Speaker, we should have seen another Select Committee appraisal of these significant, very thick amendments, so we could have got it right. We're missing an opportunity. So, Mr Speaker, we've got a number of objections with the bill. We don't believe the bill is going to be meeting our international objections. We think the purpose clause is still too weak. We've only gone halfway to improving it. The bill entirely fails to account for climate change. It ignores the precautionary approach. It fails our Treaty of Waitangi obligations. It quite simply fails the principles of natural justice when it comes to appeals in the High Court. And it fails to look at the other side of the coin, which is spatial planning and marine protection. Before I go into the substantive part of my contribution, I'd like to thank the submitters, thank the officials, thank the Minister, thank Nikki Wagner, the Chair of the Local Government Environment Committee. We saw a number of very high quality submissions made to the Select Committee. Some of those people are in the chamber today, and I would like to thank all those people, Mr Speaker. So firstly, what we need is overarching, holistic oceans legislation that looks at spatial planning and marine protection. What this bill is going to see is moves the spectre of deep-sea drilling closer. The government's got no plan when it comes to the economy apart from drill it, mine it, frack it, cut it, sell it. It's the lazy approach to economic development, Mr Speaker. It takes no vision, no planning, no sense of where future trends are going. It simply hopes that we're going to find some of last century's energy sources in the ground without looking to the future. It's a lazy path to economic development that puts our environment at risk, yet we're going to see hardly any taxes, hardly any royalties, hardly any jobs for New Zealanders, and the profits are going to flow offshore. This bill is regulating how we deal with those consents, be it for phosphate in the Chatham Rise, the gas hydrates, the methane deposits, which this government is starting to subsidise, which was revealed last week, the government subsidising research into extracting the gas hydrates stored at the bottom of the ocean, or risky deep-sea drilling. So when we look at the international obligations, numerous submitters from the Parliamentary Commission for the Environment told the committee, in their opinion, it failed to meet our international obligations. The bill, as it came out of the committee, strengthened it, but the Minister's amendments further weakened our consistency with our international obligations under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea to protect and to preserve our marine environment. Mr. Speaker, the Minister is saying she had a legal opinion on the previous drafting that shows that some people think this bill will be consistent. What we need to have is a new legal opinion based on the new wording. Now, if the Minister thought it was going to be consistent with our obligations, why on earth can't we say it's going to be consistent? The fact that the Minister had to remove consistent with UNCLOS from the text of this bill shows this government is worried that it will be interpreted consistently, and all we're going to see, as Moana Mackie pointed out, was lawyers interpreting this. It's lawyers who are benefiting from this, not the environment. With the purpose, we saw the Minister strengthen it, but only halfway. She's moved away from that flawed ideology of balance where you can degrade the environment a little bit if you're going to get a little bit of gain, or you can degrade it a lot if you're going to get a lot of economic gain. We've gone away from that flawed, failed ideology. Instead, we've seen the sustainable management principle, but we've only gone halfway. We're trying to make it closer to the Resource Management Act, but we're failing to have the requirement for decision makers to recognise and provide for. We've only gone halfway because we don't have all the other provisions that would be made under a similar environment under the Resource Management Act. For the Green Party, our economy relies on a healthy environment. We need to have environmental bottom lines, and those are, quite frankly, missing, absent from this bill. I think, Mr. Speaker, the most damaging part of this bill is the failure to account for climate change. In fact, it's more explicit than that. The EPA is unable to consider the effects of greenhouse gases and climate change when considering applications. This is 2010. The Arctic is melting at a record rate. We know it's happening. We know that humans are causing it. Well, if the government side wants to quibble about the date, but they won't have a proper debate around the big issue facing our planet, it shows this government's priorities, that they don't care about the future of the planet, they don't care about the environment, all they care about is facilitating risky deep-sea drilling for their lazy economic plans. It's egregious that we're seeing this removed from the bill. It continues the bad trend the Labor government did in 2004 when they removed it from the Resource Management Act. It treats it as if the planet doesn't matter. We see the member Annette King's common sense provision around the Moriori ignored by this government. We see the Treaty of Waitangi provisions weakened. When it comes to the Environment Court, we think it would have been more appropriate and fair to have appeals to the Environment Court. Instead, what the government's done is only to the High Court on points of law. We've got a specialist court, the Environment Court. We've got a body of case law developed, and the government quite simply wants to expedite these risky plans in our environment and removing the ability for Kiwis to have recourse to natural justice. We did see improvement on the penalties, probably the only suggestion from the Green Party that we've actually seen picked up by the government. We acknowledge that, but what we also need to see is the Energy Minister actually make sure that these companies have got to have full insurance liability, because at the moment that isn't there. The transitional provisions, the so-called Anadarko clause, are simply a sop to the industry to make it as easy as possible for them to exploit our environment where we get so little environmental gain. There's no marine protection, no spatial planning provisions. This isn't oceans legislation. This is an easy deep-sea drilling bill. What we need to see, Mr. Speaker, is future governments strengthen this law, as we've missed a massive opportunity in this House. It's disappointing the Minister wouldn't engage constructively with the opposition, so we could have seen a robust bill that had the support of this whole House. I don't think we were that far away, but it's a shame that we won't see that today, Mr. Speaker. I've outlined the number of reasons why the Green Party will be supporting this. We support the intent of an EEZ bill. That's why we voted for its first reading. We will not be voting for an EZ drilling bill.
call Nikki Wagner.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I'm very pleased to support